The sun had not yet risen, and the dim light of dawn enveloped the small village. In the old kitchen of a tiled-roof house, Mr. John, a 70-year-old man, was busy preparing. His callous, skinny hands gently arranged fresh vegetables he had just picked from the garden into a large basket. Crisp green water spinach, shiny purple eggplants, and a few small pumpkins were neatly stacked, ready to be taken to the market. Mr. John's life wasn't luxurious. At his age, he should have been resting, but he still wanted to work to keep himself occupied and earn some money to help his children. He would always say this whenever someone advised him to take it easy. He lived alone in the small house. His wife had passed away long ago, and his children were all working far away. Every morning, he woke up early, pedaling his old bicycle with the basket of vegetables to the market. For him, the market wasn't just a place to earn a living. It was also a spot to chat and socialize with old friends. That morning, like every other, Mr. John carefully checked his basket of vegetables, placed it on his long-serving bicycle, and pedaled out onto the road. The cold morning breeze caressed his wrinkled face, but in his heart, he felt warmth. As he passed the main road near the market, Mr. John tightened his grip on the handlebars, carefully maneuvering through the closely parked cars. Suddenly, as he prepared to turn into a small alley, his bicycle wobbled and collided with a car. The sound of the impact startled him. His bicycle lost balance and his basket of vegetables fell. A few bunches of vegetables and some eggs rolled onto the road. Turning around, he saw a shiny black car parked at the side, a long scratch visible on its surface. Mr. John froze for a moment, his heart pounding, not from pain but from fear. "That car looks so expensive," he mumbled, his hands trembling as he gathered the scattered vegetables from the ground. While he was still flustered, the car door swung open, and a young man dressed sharply stepped out, his face full of anger. He glanced at the scratch on the car, then turned to Mr. John. "Old man? What the hell did you do?" The young man's voice was sharp, drawing the attention of passers-by. Mr. John bowed his head, speaking softly. "Sir, I didn't mean to. I'm sorry. I'll pay for the damages." "Pay? Do you think you can afford to pay for this? Do you even know how much this car costs?" The man interrupted, his voice growing louder. The gathering crowd started watching their argument. Mr. John felt his face burning with both embarrassment and worry. He hurriedly said, "I'm sorry, sir. My bicycle slipped. Please tell me how much the repair will cost. I'll try to save up and pay you back." But his apology seemed to fuel the young man's anger further. He stepped closer, pointing his finger at Mr. John's face. "Save up? How long do you think that'll take? It's your fault, so you must take responsibility. Why aren't you at home resting instead of coming out here and causing trouble?" Those words cut deep into Mr. John's heart. He could only bow his head, his hands trembling as he picked up the fallen vegetables and cracked eggs. In the middle of the tense situation, a female voice interrupted. "What's all this noise? What's happening here? Why are you yelling at an elderly man like that?" All eyes turned to see a sophisticated woman, dressed elegantly, stepping out of another car parked nearby. Her eyes were stern yet composed. The elegant woman approached, a luxury handbag resting on her arm, her high heels clicking rhythmically on the pavement. Her gaze swept across the scene, a luxurious car with a scratch, a frail old man picking up his fallen vegetables, and a curious crowd. She frowned slightly, her voice calm yet commanding. "What's going on here?" The young driver who had just been scolding Mr. John turned to her, his demeanor instantly changing. The roughness disappeared, replaced by a deferential tone. Bowing slightly, he said, "Ma'am, this old man scratched your car. I was just handling it." "Handling it? By yelling like that?" Her eyes conveyed clear disapproval. The young man hesitated, unable to respond. Seeing this, the woman turned to Mr. John, her tone softening. "Sir, are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" Mr. John looked up, his eyes red from the pressure and embarrassment. He shook his head, his voice quivering. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm fine. I just accidentally scratched your car. I'm truly sorry, really sorry." She studied him for a moment before nodding slightly, her expression softening. She then turned to the driver, her voice firm. "The car is scratched, but it's not a major issue. Why were you scolding him like that? Don't you know how to speak respectfully? Respectfully? He's an elderly man, and accidents happen. We'll address this, but not by mistreating an old man." The driver, visibly embarrassed, mumbled, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I was a bit heated." The woman sighed, shaking her head as if disappointed. Then, addressing the crowd, she said, "Please don't gather here. This matter will be resolved." The crowd started dispersing, though many remained nearby, their eyes still on the unfolding situation. She turned back to Mr. John, offering a faint smile. "Sir, please don't worry. I'm not the kind of person to trouble someone over a small scratch, but could you tell me what happened so I can understand better?" Feeling reassured by her words, Mr. John took a deep breath and explained, "This morning, I was heading to the market. My bicycle slipped, and it accidentally hit your car. I didn't mean to. I truly didn't. If you need to fix the car, I'll try to save up and pay for the repairs. I know this is my fault." The woman listened attentively, occasionally nodding but never interrupting him. When he finished, she smiled gently. "Sir, there's no need to worry so much. I see that you're honest and responsible. The car has a minor scratch, and it's not worth making a big deal about." The young driver, however, still looked annoyed and interjected, "But ma'am, it's his fault. If we let this go so easily, what will people think? What if someone else damages the car and just says sorry next time?" Her expression turned stern as she cut him off. "Enough. A mistake is a mistake, but that doesn't give you the right to speak so rudely to him. Do you know how old he is? Have you no respect for your elders?" Her sharp words silenced the driver. The murmurs from the crowd turned into words of agreement, with some praising her for standing up for the elderly. Mr. John felt both comforted and guilty for causing such trouble. Hesitating, he said, "Thank you so much for understanding, ma'am. But it's still my fault. Please let me know the cost of repairs, and I'll do my best to pay for it." Before he could finish, the woman raised her hand, signaling him to stop. "There's no need, sir. I don't want any money for the repairs. But do you have any children? Could you call them here so we can discuss this further?" Mr. John nodded and pulled out an old phone from his pocket, his hands trembling as he dialed a number. Speaking softly, he said, "Hello, David. It's your father. Could you come to the main road near the market? I've run into a little problem." On the other end, a young man's worried voice replied, "What happened, Dad? Are you okay? I'm coming right away." As Mr. John hung up, the woman smiled reassuringly. "Let's wait for your son to arrive, sir. Don't worry. Everything has a solution." Mr. John nodded, feeling more at ease, though he had no idea that his son's arrival would bring an unexpected twist to the story. Within 20 minutes, a motorbike arrived at considerable speed. The rider was David, the only son of Mr. Tu. An Huang quickly stopped the car, took off his helmet, and ran towards the crowd standing around the luxury car. "Father, are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" he asked, anxiously checking his father's body. His face showed clear worry. Mr. Tu shook his head, his voice deep and sorrowful. "Father is fine. I just accidentally scratched someone's car. I'm sorry, but the driver said we need to pay for the repairs. I called you here to see how to handle it. I don't know what to do." Hearing this, Hong turned to look at the car. A long scratch was visible on the shiny paint, but what caught his attention more was the unpleasant attitude of the driver, who couldn't contain his anger. He raised his voice. "It's just a scratch, and you're making a big deal out of it? This is my father. He has already apologized. Isn't that enough? Why are you shouting at him like that?" The driver frowned, about to retort, but the woman standing next to him quickly raised her hand to stop him. She calmly looked at Hong, her sharp yet composed gaze. "You are the son of Mr. Han?" she asked. Hong nodded, his face still tense with anger. "Yes, I am his son. This is my father's fault, but your driver's attitude is unacceptable. Are you the car's owner? If you want to repair the car, I'm happy to pay, but I won't tolerate my father being bullied." The woman smiled gently, her smile kind yet intelligent. "Calm down. I am the owner of the car, not the driver. I have no intention of making things difficult for your father. He has apologized sincerely, and I don't think this is a big issue to make a fuss over." Her words were like a splash of cold water, soothing Hong's anger. He paused, looking at her, his gaze becoming more thoughtful. He nodded. "If that's what you think, thank you. But my father will still take responsibility. We will pay for the repair costs." Mr. Tu quickly grabbed his son's arm, his voice filled with concern. "Huang, I've said it was unintentional. She isn't making things hard for me. Don't be too tense. But Huang remained serious. He turned to the woman with determination in his eyes. My father made a mistake, and I don't want him to be blamed for causing trouble and then not taking responsibility. Please provide the repair cost. I'll handle it. The woman chuckled softly, shaking her head. You seem like someone who values responsibility. But let me remind you, this is unnecessary. This scratch is not worth fixing. What matters more is the attitude of everyone here. She turned and looked at the driver with a cold gaze. You know very well I don't like people who treat others disrespectfully. I've told you many times never to act arrogantly towards the elderly. You've disappointed me. The driver lowered his head, not daring to say anything further. The atmosphere around them grew quiet. Suddenly, the woman turned to Mr. Tu and gently bent down to pick up some vegetables that had fallen on the ground. These are the products of your labor. Let me compensate you for the eggs and vegetables that were ruined, she said. Mr. Tu immediately waved his hand. No need for that, miss. I've damaged your car. You don't need to compensate me for anything. But she remained insistent. She took out a large bill from her wallet and handed it to Mr. Tu. Please take it. This is not for the car repairs but for compensating you for your labor. Just consider it as me buying these vegetables and eggs. The crowd around them murmured in awe, some admiring the woman's kindness, while others were surprised by the way she handled the situation. Ong stood silently, feeling his heart soften. He bowed his head to the woman. Thank you for not making things difficult for my father. I was too hot-headed earlier, and I hope you'll forgive me. The woman smiled gently, responding in a calm yet meaningful voice. It's nothing. I just hope both you and the driver here learn a lesson. Never let anger override your respect for others, especially the elderly. The world is already chaotic enough, and a little kindness will make everything better. Her words made Hong and the crowd fall silent, reflecting on her message. Just when it seemed everything had calmed down, the woman turned to Mr. Tu once more, her eyes now thoughtful, as though weighing something in her mind. Finally she smiled gently, yet meaningfully, and spoke slowly. Sir, I don't want to make things hard for you or your son, but I just want to say a few words before I leave. Both Mr. Tu and Huang were surprised. They listened respectfully, as did the crowd around them, unwilling to leave. The woman continued, her voice soft and full of emotion. In fact, I understand your situation very well because my family was once poor too. I grew up in a rural village, and I saw my mother selling vegetables at the market to raise my siblings and me. Every time she faced difficulties, I would wonder why people treated workers like her so coldly. As I grew up, I promised myself I would never forget those days, and would never allow someone's self-respect to be hurt because of money. Her words left Mr. Tu and the crowd in stunned silence. Some began to whisper among themselves, gazing at her with admiration. This luxury car might be expensive, but it wasn't as important as human kindness. A scratch on the car was nothing compared to the value of respecting the elderly and empathizing with hard-working people like Mr. Tu. Mr. Tu had apologized, and that was enough. No compensation was needed. She looked directly at Hong and continued. You are a good son, protecting your father, but sometimes, instead of getting angry, we need to learn to engage calmly. Your father has taught you a lesson in responsibility, but today, I think you should also learn a lesson in patience and listening. Hong remained silent, feeling her words resonate deeply in his mind. He bowed his head and said quietly, Thank you. She turned to the driver with a sterner gaze. And you work for me, but your attitude today has disappointed me deeply. I don't need a skilled driver. I need someone who knows how to respect and empathize with others. Remember, if you continue to behave as you did today, you won't be working for me much longer. Feeling reassured by her words, Mr. John took a deep breath and explained, This morning, I was heading to the market. My bicycle slipped, and it accidentally hit your car. I didn't mean to. I truly didn't. If you need to fix the car, I'll try to save up and pay for the repairs. I know this is my fault. The woman listened attentively, occasionally nodding but never interrupting him. When he finished, she smiled gently. Sir, there's no need to worry so much. I see that you're honest and responsible. The car has a minor scratch, and it's not worth making a big deal about. The young driver, however, still looked annoyed and interjected. But ma'am, it's his fault. If we let this go so easily, what will people think? What if someone else damages the car and just says sorry next time? Her expression turned stern as she cut him off. Enough. A mistake is a mistake, but that doesn't give you the right to speak so rudely to him. Do you know how old he is? Have you no respect for your elders? Her sharp words silenced the driver. The murmurs from the crowd turned into words of agreement, with some praising her for standing up for the elderly. Mr. John felt both comforted and guilty for causing such trouble. Hesitating, he said, "Thank you so much for understanding, ma'am. But it's still my fault. Please let me know the cost of repairs, and I'll do my best to pay for it." Before he could finish, the woman raised her hand, signaling him to stop. "There's no need, sir. I don't want any money for the repairs. But do you have any children? Could you call them here so we can discuss this further?" Mr. John nodded and pulled out an old phone from his pocket, his hands trembling as he dialed a number. Speaking softly, he said, "Hello, David. It's your father. Could you come to the main road near the market? I've run into a little problem." On the other end, a young man's worried voice replied, "What happened, Dad? Are you okay? I'm coming right away." As Mr. John hung up, the woman smiled reassuringly. "Let's wait for your son to arrive, sir. Don't worry. Everything has a solution." Mr. John nodded, feeling more at ease, though he had no idea that his son's arrival would bring an unexpected twist to the story. Within 20 minutes, a motorbike arrived at considerable speed. The rider was David, the only son of Mr. Tu. An Huang quickly stopped the car, took off his helmet, and ran towards the crowd standing around the luxury car. "Father, are you okay? Are you hurt anywhere?" he asked, anxiously checking his father's body. His face showed clear worry. Mr. Tu shook his head, his voice deep and sorrowful. "Father is fine. I just accidentally scratched someone's car. I'm sorry, but the driver said we need to pay for the repairs. I called you here to see how to handle it. I don't know what to do." The driver lowered his head, murmuring, "I'm sorry, I'll improve." The woman nodded slightly, then turned back to Mr. Smith and James. She pulled out a business card from her purse and handed it to James. "If you ever need assistance with work or anything else, don't hesitate to call me. I'm always ready to help people who have determination and compassion." James hesitated as he took the card, glancing at it. His eyes widened in astonishment upon realizing that she was the CEO of a major corporation in the city. She smiled gently. "Don't be surprised. I'm just someone who has experienced hardships and understands the value of kindness." Finally, she slightly bowed her head toward Mr. Smith before stepping back into her car. Before closing the door, she added, "Mr. Smith, I hope life always treats you well. Take care of yourself and continue living as kindly as you always have." The car slowly drove away from the scene. The crowd began to disperse, but their admiration for the woman lingered. Mr. Smith looked at the business card in James's hand, sighed in relief, and smiled. "Do you see, son? There are still many good people in this world. She truly is a remarkable person." James nodded, his eyes filled with respect. He suddenly realized that life isn't just about responsibility and pressure, but also about compassion and the invaluable lessons from those we encounter by chance. As the luxurious car disappeared at the end of the road, the atmosphere seemed to calm. Mr. Smith remained standing there, his gaze following the direction of the woman who had just left, his heart swelling with gratitude and an indescribable sense of relief. James knelt carefully, picking up the scattered vegetables from the ground, his tone softer than before. "Dad, I was wrong today. I was too hot-tempered and didn't consider your feelings. If it weren't for her, I'm afraid things would have escalated further." Mr. Smith smiled warmly, his eyes filled with wisdom. "It's good that you've realized that, son. Not every situation requires a firm tone to resolve, especially when you don't fully understand the other person." James lowered his head, lost in thought. It seemed he had learned not just a lesson from the woman, but also the importance of patience and respect in all situations. While the crowd started to thin, the story of Mr. Smith and the woman remained the topic of hushed discussions. An elderly woman selling goods nearby glanced at Mr. Smith with fondness. "You're so fortunate to have met someone so kind. I've lived here for years and rarely seen a wealthy person as compassionate as her." If there were more people like her in society, life would be much more peaceful. A man standing nearby added, "That's right. She not only taught her driver how to respect others, but also made witnesses like us reflect on our actions." Those words filled Mr. Smith with warmth and a bit of embarrassment. He nodded slightly in gratitude, then turned to James. "Come on, son. Help me gather the rest of the vegetables. This matter is over now. Let's move on." Continuing their tasks, James nodded and helped his father sort out the items that were still usable. However, his mind couldn't stop thinking about the business card the woman had left behind. That evening, as the two sat by the old wooden table in their small house, James took out the card and looked at it again. The name on it read, Anna Nguyen, CEO of Sunlight Corporation. James was deep in thought as he turned to Mr. Smith. "Dad, she said I could reach out if I needed help. Do you think I should try?" Mr. Smith looked surprised but nodded. "Why not? But remember, no one helps forever. If she gives you an opportunity, you have to work hard with your own ability and kindness." The next morning, James decided to call the number on the card. After a brief conversation, he was invited to Anna Nguyen's office for a discussion. With sincerity and a positive attitude, James was quickly offered a new position in her corporation that suited his skills. As time passed, life for Mr. Smith remained simple, but his smile grew brighter. James, on the other hand, matured not only in his work, but also in how he treated others. He learned to be patient, to listen, and to value the small but precious things in life. Whenever he visited his father, James shared the new lessons he had learned from his work and his kind colleagues. He often mentioned Anna Nguyen, who not only changed his life, but also taught him the importance of empathy and compassion. The story of the elegant woman, the vegetable seller, and the driver gradually became a legend retold in the market. It was remembered as a lesson in humanity, civil behavior, and kindness. One peaceful morning, as Mr. Smith sat on his porch sipping hot tea, a smile spread across his face as he noticed a car stopping at the gate. The person stepping out was none other than Anna Nguyen. "Good morning, Mr. Smith. I was passing by and thought I'd visit you for a bit," she said. Mr. Smith invited her inside, his joy evident on his face. They sat together and talked about life and the simple yet beautiful things it offered. Before leaving, Anna Nguyen left Mr. Smith with words that he would never forget. "You know, kindness is like a seed. If planted in the right place, it will sprout and spread. And that day, it was you who planted that seed in me and everyone else around us." Mr. Smith sat quietly, watching Anna Nguyen's silhouette fade into the distance. His heart felt unusually warm. Perhaps no matter how hard life becomes, as long as one holds on to kindness and compassion, things will eventually get better. This story was not just a minor incident, but a testament to the fact that even in a bustling society, empathy and respect remain unchanging values. And if everyone learns to sow the seeds of kindness, the world will become a more beautiful place, one day at a time.